He was summoned by mistake to become a simple healer, but he's stronger than the legendary heroes. Yusato is an ugly, disgusting, pathetic high school with nothing going on in his life. Bad grades, no friends, no girls, just like you. In short, he's the nice guy who helps some birds on a usual day. Yet, he wishes he was in a fantasy world to cure his boredom of being an ordinary loser. But one day, someone steals his umbrella, and he decides to wait for the rain to pass because princesses cannot get wet. However, despite the waiting, the rain never stops. Suddenly, he hears the student council president Suzune asking him what's going on. She asks if he doesn't have an umbrella, and despite being nervous around her, he confirms. She tells him the school is about to close, and Yusato takes it as a clue to get his ugly face out of her sight. He decides to leave, but the beautiful and perfect president stops him by telling him she won't let him get wet. Suddenly, Vice President Kazuki appears, the typical perfect dude, and claims that he will let Yusato have his spare. Suzune asks if they're friends, but Kazuki replies they're classmates. Yusato is confused because they never spoke before, but realizes that he's the typical disgusting nice guy. Yusato thanks him for the umbrella, and Kazuki asks what they should call him. Suzune steps in the middle of them, telling him she will also call him Yusato. Our pathetic loser blushes, thinking she's trying to flirt with him. They ask if he wants to walk home with them, to which he also cannot believe he gets the chance to walk with the cool kids. He accepts the deal, and as they walk, Yusato explains that Kazuki only talks to girls and stuff. Kazuki answers that he simply answers the girls' questions. Suzune teases Kazuki's popularity, and Yusato tries to give his best shot. He mentions how Suzune is pretty much a goddess. Yes, he barely leaves his mom's basement. Suzune calls herself an average student, but Kazuki also decides to join the Dumb and Dumber party, mentioning how perfect she is. She's the best student, great at sports, kind, and also pretty. Yusato then decides to give his shot and asks if they're a couple. The two get confused but explain those are just rumors because they spend tons of time together in the student council. She still feels impressed that Yusato is the only person who had a pair to ask it. Suzune asks if Yusato has some plans for the future, but he plans to stay in his mom's basement. Kazuki mentions that she asks the same question to everyone. Suzune replies that she's just curious because she has none. Yusato asks why she doesn't, and she reveals that she doesn't have any because she accomplishes all her goals pretty fast. She reveals that for that reason, she feels isolated and doesn't think she belongs to this place. But Yusato thinks that they're quite similar as they feel the same thing about their lives. Suddenly, Suzune and Kazuki heard a bell and stopped. Yusato is confused and asks what's going on. Kazuki asks if he heard the bell, but Yusato doesn't. They hear the bell again, this time even louder, but Yusato still cannot hear it. He gets closer when suddenly, a magic circle appears under their feet. Kazuki starts to freak out, but Yusato spits some facts. They're being summoned to another world. Kazuki thinks that this loser is crazy, but Suzume's reaction shocks them. She's smiling while asking if he means that they will reach a place full of magic, monsters, and heroes. In those last moments, Yusato is impressed about how Suzume has a thing for that stuff. Seconds later, they open their eyes to find themselves inside a strange room. Upon looking around, they see a random geezer sitting on a throne. Yusato is confused about this place and its people, but Kazuki doesn't know. He then looks for Suzume, just to find her hyped and smiling because this is another world. He thinks she just went bonkers. The old geezer sitting on the throne is happy they managed to wake up and stuff, but Kazuki arrogantly asks what is this all about. The geezer introduces himself as Lloyd, the king of Linger. Kazuki is confused, but Suzume is happy about it. The geezer explains they have been summoned as heroes, which makes Suzume even happier. The king explains the same garbage as always. There's a demon lord who resurrected and is currently raising its armies. The kingdom has been attacked for the past 2 years, but they barely survived. Their last hope was to the forbidden spell to summon heroes from another world to fight against the guy who was cheated on by his wife. Suzume is always acting ecstatic every time she hears something new, however, gets mad and tells him to stop kidding. He literally calls the king selfish for dragging them here and doing the dirty work. He asks them to return them to their world, but the king explains that's not possible because the summoning only works in one direction. Kazuki continues his Karen mode, mentioning they all have families and stuff. The king replies they are desperate, but Kazuki couldn't care less. He gets angrier, but the soldiers point their arms at him. Yusato tries to calm him down, and Kazuki finally follows some good advice. The king walks forward and kneels in front of Kazuki, promising to find a way to send them home after the job is done. Everyone else also kneels and Suzyum asks the king why he is calling them heroes. The king tells his mage Welsi to explain. She reveals that the summoning spell seeks people who have the potential to become heroes. In short, everyone with that potential will hear the sound of a bell ringing. Suzyum and Kazuki understand that condition but then remember that Yuzato is different. They ask if he truly didn't hear anything and he confirms, which means he got here by accident. His parents didn't want him, nor this world, just like you. They then go into Welsi's room to check their magical aptitude. All they need to do is touch the crystal ball and they will find which magic they can use. Suzyum becomes all hyped out while Welsi starts preparing for the test. Meanwhile, Kazuki asks Yuzato if he's alright with all of this. Yuzato says it's fine as Welsi already told him he could probably still use magic despite not being able to be a hero. However, Kazuki is talking about being summoned to this world against his will. In his case, they didn't even want him. Yuzato dismisses it because it's all he wanted. Kazuki thinks that Yuzato is pretty chill about it, but he mentions that Suzyum is the odd one. They look at her being a typical weirdo and think that's true, to the point that Kazuki thinks this is her being an optimist. Yuzato knows this is not the case, but they suddenly see the crystal ball glowing. Welsi made all preparations and told Suzyum to start her test. She happily touches the crystal ball and a yellow glow appears. Welsi explains that this means that she can use thunder magic, but she also has a huge amount of mana. Kazuki thinks that Suzyum looks happy, but deep down Yuzato knows this magic fits her fantasy dream. Kazuki then touches the crystal ball, and it turns white. Welsi explains he has a light attribute. Suzyum becomes all hyped out, telling him to use a laser beam and stuff, but Yuzato tells her to stop being a nerd. She gets annoyed that Yuzato cut her off, but she then reveals that she likes that in a man. Yuzato feels shattered. He thought of her as the perfect girl, turns out she's a freak. Welsi explains that light magic is the strongest attribute because it counters the demon lord. Yuzato decides to try it too, but there's a flash of green. Suzyum and Kazuki think that's a beautiful and calming color and ask Welsi what is that attribute. Yet, Welsi is freaking out. She grabs Yuzato's hand and runs back into the throne room. The king is confused but asks if they already checked their aptitudes. Welsi confirms, mentioning Kazuki and Suzyum's huge potential. But there is a problem, Yuzato. The king laughs while asking if he has the power to control darkness or something. But he's shocked when he learns the crystal turned green. Welsi explains his attribute is extremely rare, but the king tells her to shut up and not say it. Yuzato is confused thinking his attribute is bad. The king starts to plot, mentioning they must take Yuzato as far away from the castle as possible. However, he doesn't think there's any safe place. Maybe they should hide him in town for a while. Meanwhile, a woman is walking in the hallway. The king tells his guards to make preparations, but Yuzato says that he doesn't understand what's going on. He asks if he's dangerous and if there is someone else with his attribute. The king freaks out as he replies yes, but that person is bad news. Suddenly, the woman walks into the throne room, scaring everyone. This is the person the king was talking about. She asks the king how the summoning ritual went and if the heroes are already there. The king tries to play it cool, asking if it isn't her off day. Yet, she refuses to take any off days. She then notices Yuzato and asks if he's the hero. Yuzato gets scared and crawls back, and the king explains he was summoned by mistake along with the heroes. He calls Yuzato an average pleb, but she clearly notices the king is sweating. She asks for his name and introduces herself as Rose, the captain of the rescue team. Yet, Yuzato clearly knows that she looks like someone who should be killing, not rescuing someone. Welsi intervenes, mentioning the heroes are waiting by the crystal ball, and tells her she will take Rose there. Rose accepts that and prepares to leave. The king feels relieved everything went well and tells Yuzato to rest while they figure out what to do in his situation. Yuzato accepts, but he wants to know what his magic attribute means. He stupidly asks what a green light means. Upon hearing those words, Rose stops. Everyone inside the room starts to freak out. Rose turns back and asks if he just said green. Yuzato confirms, and she tells the king that she will be taking Yuzato with her. The king freaks out, telling Welsi to get Yuzato out of there. Welsi casts a spell, creating a bubble around Yuzato, forcing him out of the castle. Yet, Rose smiles and dashes outside with her insane speed. Welsi's bubble gets out of the window and tries to take him as far as possible outside the kingdom. However, Rose's speed and power enable her to catch up with him. She then punches the bubble, breaking it. Yuzato thinks he's done for. After all, there's no parachutes in this world. Yet, Rose manages to reach and catch him. She uses a statue to break down her fall and calls out the king. She tells him that she will turn Yuzato into a proper healer and walks away. The king shouts at her to return, mentioning that he knows that she wants to recruit more healers. However, Usato was summoned by accident. Rose ignores the king and continues walking. After returning inside, Welsi explains to Suzume and Kazuki that Usato was taken. They're worried he might be in danger, but Welsi explains that's not the case. Kazuki wants an explanation. She reveals he was taken away from the castle to the rescue squad. She reveals that Usato's attribute is healing magic. Healers are rare in this world and Rose is one of them. Meanwhile, Rose is taking Usato under her arm to her base when a fox girl pays attention to what's happening. Welsi continues to explain that Rose will basically teach Usato everything she knows. Suzume thinks that's pretty normal, but Welsi reveals that Rose's training methods are unorthodox, which means Usato will be living in hell. After reaching the base, Rose explains Usato has the potential to become a healer. He's pretty confused, and she reveals he will be living here from now on and that's the reason she brought him. She then calls the rest of the members, but when Usato looks at them, he realizes they're literally a band of bandits. Rose tells them to take care of Usato, but they all look at him like serial killers. He tries to back away while scared in fear, but the guys introduce themselves, which looks more like a robbery. Yet, Rose kicks Tong away because Usato is crying in fear. They complain, mentioning they were introducing themselves in a nice way. Rose then explains they all belong to the squad but are not healers. In fact, her rescue squad has only 2 more healers, but they're stationed somewhere else, which is why she will personally teach him about healing magic. Usato freaks out. His instincts are telling him to scream and run, but he can't move. He tries to ask for another instructor, but she ignores him while saying that training starts tomorrow. She orders Tong to show Usato the place and leaves. The bandit gang smiles at him and tells him how miserable his life will become because Rose will be teaching him. In short, he will be living in hell. During the night, Usato is initially worried about everything, but he then realizes there is no point in worrying and falls asleep. Watch this next video. See you on the next one.